Okay, we're on. It's recording. And if there's an issue, I will get up and try and fix it as soon as possible. Do not worry. Welcome back. So, this has been a really awesome day. We've had wonderful discussions. We started with a little bit of a technical slug, but that's fine. It happens. We're going to stay positive and run with it. This is the last session of the day. It's on geopolitics and artificial intelligence, which is the most interesting topic in the world to talk about today. Multiple books are coming out on the subject. There are conferences on the subject. Governments are meeting on the subject. And yet, it's the private companies that are dictating the norms today. And it's an amazing landscape to analyze. This particular group is unique in a way. It's got young voices from across the world: France, India, EU, Iran, Canada, China. You cannot have a better group to discuss this subject. So to start with, let's have opening remarks. And let's begin with you, Zhao.
Okay, opening remarks. I can send whatever, whatever, anything, right? Okay, so let me continue my articulation about this thing. We see a lot of discussions around um, global south, global north, or global majority, or global minority. Some articulations about this. I think it's very important to recognize that, especially when we heard that this morning session 2, Michael raised a very, very important question. He mentioned about the AI summit in India recently, and he especially said that he was surprised about the fact that India did not mention any words or categories or concerns about safety risks, something like this, but it instead emphasized like issues like democratization and development. So I'm going to address this kind of view. I think I have some reflections to make. I think most important, firstly, the problem itself is being redefined because for Western or global North, we think that risks and safety issues and like potential harms of the AI and existential threats and risks and misinformation and biases embedded in the system are the priorities, are the problems. But for the global South countries and global South context, I think AI is often framed as an opportunity and as a way where people can get access to better education, better medical care system, better legal advices. So it's an opportunity, it's hope, it's development, it's a very good infrastructure. So this means that the same technology is being reconstructed as because there are two different fundamental different recognitions and epistemic recognitions about the situation right now. And but at the same time, I recognize that because Global South often reframe AI and technologies in terms of the opportunity and development, certain risks may become marginalized. As I have said, for example, some surveillance may be interpreted as a form of governance, and a lot of like transnational authoritarian practices. So I think in this sense, the issue is not that this kind of risks are ignored, but how they're reinterpreted within a different value systems. And also, we see a lot of different gaps and different recognitions between countries and between different regimes like democracy and some authoritarian and other regime context. So we're seeing it's not simply, I think it's not simply a political disagreement, but fundamentally it's about different ethical and deeper epistemic frameworks that is playing out. So but also at the same time agree with Oorja and Amita that we should not understand this situation as problematic because it also represents a necessarily corrective. This orientation toward development is both historically grounded and I think projectively justified because from materialistic perspective, people do get a lot of benefits, especially for grassroots people do get a lot of benefits from this kind of development. So fundamentally, I think what we're witnessing is not just a political divergence, but at the end of the day, it's a deeper epistemic and political reconfiguration of AI governance itself. And but before everything, we should recognize and acknowledge that there are fundamental differences in different contexts and cultures and traditions. Before we make any reasonable judgment and reasonable recommendations or governance recommendations at all.
Thank you, Xiao. That was extremely interesting. We'll come back to your points later. Maral, can we have your opening remarks?
Yes, I would, in terms of geopolitics and emerging power, something that I also highlighted in the previous session, it's about the move that we see from the basically the traditional form of geopolitics towards the dependency of a new form of dependency that is deepening because of the way that um, the resources around AI are being controlled, especially in terms of, for example, semiconductors and access to minerals and natural resources, in terms of who controls the data, the clouds, and also other equipments that are related to this technology. And also, I think another important discussion that is coming up that the AI governance around that started earlier was the whole struggle about innovation versus regulation. Now we can see that this is basically being changed towards the agents of power or agents of control, whether they are the actors who are doing that or whether there is a different form of technology that allows that to happen in terms of distribution of information, even whether the information is fake or truth or the knowledge is truth, how accessible it is, who can use it, who can manipulate it. We discussed this in the previous discussion. So I think all of these elements have a huge impact on how the geopolitical context is going to evolve, and also about the structure of power and this distribution of power that is going to have a huge impact on the shift that is going to happen into the global order. But underlying that, I think some of the things that we need to take into consideration is the question of sovereignty that we discussed earlier about AI and the digital sovereignty, but is I think is becoming more about the sovereignty, is about the struggle of dependency. How much you're going to allow the emerging powers that are truly dealing with the infrastructure of the technology are going to have access to your either raw resources or the data, the build resources that now are extremely important. And all of these resources are actually at this moment are lying in the global majority. So how global majority is going to be able to protect itself through the order that we are going to create, so they will be protected against the extractivism that is going to come out of the power or the race over the uh, control of the technology or development of the models, but also having access to power and the distribution and the influence of that. I think sovereignty is one important issue. And the other thing I would say that you see that moving from either bipolarism or multipolarism towards different layers of challenge that is not just related to the actors, but also to the resources, but also to the hierarchy of power, and also the regulations that are come with it, who is going to impose that, who's going to create that, and how that going to impact our economy, our control of exports, trades and policies around that. I think these are all going to be impacted through the shift that we are going to see through the geopolitics and the world order, and power.
Fantastic. You touched upon many points that I like to discuss with you. My opinion about artificial intelligence and global order, multipolarity, international relations, right? At the offset, let me state it. I think AI is the only technology which will augment the way humans relate with each other, collectives of humans, nations included. Throughout history, seen a technology which is as transformative. So it's very interesting to see how all of this is going to turn out in terms of global politics. Adrian can be.
Sure. Yeah, many points that I'll also, but I'll focus maybe on, I have maybe two main points. The first one, I think it's the one that I've been thinking today with our discussions, and trying to think about my own comments. So I guess one takeaway that I would say is that I think we need to broaden our definition of governance, what is considered governance, and go beyond regulation and really think of technology and design of technology as a form of governance, rather than separating it as something the technical on one side, the political on another side. I think we really need to grapple with the extent to which designing technologies is political. Um, the second thing that I'm thinking, and I'm going to frame it more as a form of questions than answers. I'm wondering if we're not judging AI and the politics of AI based on theoretical lens from the 20th century. I'm wondering if we need to update the way we think about politics in general. And so, for example, I think we're still very concerned of like how AI is going to produce growth for every country and how we can have like reduce inequalities. But to me, it sounds like we live in a very different world today. That world being the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is the multiplication and integration of different forms of changes, climate change, political change, technological change. All these changes are accelerating and integrating with one another. And so in that context, how do we think about the politics of AI? Should we just forget about climate change? Should we just put it as a second afterthought? Or should we integrate it in the way we think about AI and the politics of AI? Why is the decomputing, so the idea of criticizing computing, the whole existence of computing systems, why is decomputing still a taboo? Why can we not talk about the politics of decomputing? Why do we rush into thinking how we can leverage the benefits? How do we rush into trying to find hope? Why is not despair? Why cannot be despair productive? Is despair a feeling that we should avoid or something we should grapple with? I guess that would be my question.
Oh, that's amazing. Let's go back to this idea of politics and decomputing. You tell us what.
Yeah, so that's a question, open-ended question. Like I know there are people working on this, so I need to actually make more work about it. But I guess the historical origin of this is connected in part to the Luddites in the early 20th century. The Luddites are often misinterpreted as techno-pessimists who didn't like the new technologies coming. That's not true. They were not anti-technology in general. They were anti-automation of their own job. So they were mostly workers who understood very quickly that the technology that were actually developed, the machinery was about to remove their skills, get rid of their skills and replace them and push them to unemployment. And so in reaction to that, they started breaking the machineries that the CEOs were implementing in their factory. And so decomputing, I guess, is different forms of resistance against computing systems that can be from like a reform, like protectionism. So like putting tariffs or putting kind of like national reforms to not import everything into the country, to more radical forms of politics, which can go to breaking technologies, breaking data centers or like illegal forms of it.
That's very interesting. I've never heard of this term. For Abhishek, let's see you.
Yeah. A few quick points. So geopolitics in the age of AI and building norms in the age of AI. So I would like to present for you the processual dimension of norm building. So how actually the AI platforms, let's say the oil companies, they actually make use of norms to sustain their business model. So first, we have to understand the business model. So the entire debate on AI, or let's say the entire AI infrastructure, it builds upon the data economy. Now we have to go back in the past, and we have to understand how uh, certain norm compromises were struck, and those norm compromises led to the scenario that we are facing right now. I would like to point out to the post 9/11 political milieu in the United States. So earlier, when Google used to be just simply a search engine, and they actually didn't have an elaborate mechanism of data mining and uh, exploiting that data for commercial exploitation, there was nothing essential about the practice of exploiting surplus data, or let's say our behavioral footprints on the internet for advertising, for predictive analysis, for targeting. So it was the dot-com bubble that initiated a crisis, and Google was looking for sustained revenues. And in this milieu, some engineers, and there was one Indian techie, if I'm not wrong, his name was Amit Patel. He was interested in data mining, and he was the one who pioneered the idea that our behavioral footprints on the internet can be used for predictive analysis. And in the post 9/11 political milieu in the US, there was a growing nexus between the security establishment and these platforms for obvious surveillance purposes. So, on one hand, we have a liberal democracy like the United States, which promotes values like human rights, fundamental freedoms, privacy, everything. I mean, all the lofty ideals of liberal values. But when the state is faced with a security threat, it compromises with those norms, those values that are derived from liberal uh, Western values. For instance, privacy was compromised, and Google was allowed to continue with its commercialization and exploitation of our behavioral data. So, what I'm trying to argue is there is nothing essential about the way these practices have been institutionalized. Because once a business practice is institutionalized, it gets allowed by the state, or let's say the regulators. Other peers in the industry, they follow that practice. So the the fundamental problem is the commercialization and exploitation of our behavioral data for predictive analysis and advertising. That is number one. Next, the norm compromise, the post 9/11 US, the attitude of the post 9/11 US administration, the norm compromise that allowed this kind of practices to be institutionalized, that led to further exploitation of data, and that is how we have got the AI models of today. Next, how norm compromises happen beyond the West. There have been some remarkable memoirs by former employees of Meta, or let's say Facebook, and the main argument there is, since they are essentially business-oriented platforms. They are not aligned with one set of values. For instance, they can be Silicon Valley-based platforms. They can be based in the United States. But when they try to expand their business practices in other countries like China or let's say Russia, they forge compromises with uh, local administrations. They tweak their platforms, their moderation policies, what kind of elements they are going to allow on their platforms and what kind of elements they are going to ban from their platforms. The activists disliked by the regime, they can get censored. These kinds of decisions are made to appease the local administration. So AI systems or AI models, or let's say the AI business model, which is fundamentally based on the data economy, which flourished under the liberal principle of free flow of information. It now is at the verge of making compromises with the so-called authoritarian regimes, and they are adapting to the requirements of those regimes. So my point is simple. We are talking about values, we are talking about norms, ethics, human rights, and stuff like that. But when we are approaching geopolitics in the age of AI, there is a rupture. There's a rupture between the liberal West on one hand and the rest on the other. I'm not using the term authoritarian because I have my share of reservation of with respect to making such binary. My point is AI platforms, they operate through these kinds of norm compromises. On one hand, they adapt to the requirements of the host nations. They have global operations. They exploit labor of their host nations the way industrial capitalism always looks for cheap labor offshore. The same kind of process is in place with AI. So, let me conclude. My point is that we need to understand and break down this process of norm compromises to make our governance tools more effective. Unless and until we understand these bits and parts of norm compromises, the process of norm compromises, I think the operations of AI platforms would still remain mystified. So
That
that's
was extremely interesting, Avishek. Very detailed history lesson there. I, you know that I have problems with that argument on exploitation of labor data, etc. You innovate, you own the rights, but not about my opinion. Let's go to Patrick now. Opening remarks, please.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. I'll try to contribute as best as I can. Maybe I will start by saying that scholars have the tendency to make their topic as the most important. And I would actually disagree with the introductory statement that geopolitics and AI is the most important thing. I think it is made explicitly or implicitly by some actors, as for instance, Dario Amodei, right, the head of Anthropic, who repeats this on and on that it is the most important thing. But I still think that there are things that are most important than AI and geopolitics and financial interest, or who has international agency and international authority is extremely important, and in my view, more important than AI and geopolitics. I think AI adds a technical or technological layer to how we think about it, how we think about global governance, the landscape, how it has reconfigured the landscape with new actors, new possibilities. Maybe one difference is that AI is now kind of treated as a semi-actor. So if we borrow, for instance, Latour's framework that I know Adrian uses a lot, AI would be considered as an actant to some extent, but it's almost beyond this because it almost reached the stage of an actor with some form of sentience, the way it is treated. And I think in many ways that's a key difference that we have to handle in the way we engage with global governance. But it's also not yet an actor fully. It's in the hands of hegemons the US or China, not completely, because we've seen also that the big tech, they also have their say in things. It's not necessarily only AI. I don't know. In the recent war, we've seen that having access to Starlink or not can change the outcome of a war. So to me, the question that's really important is, who is the agent ordering the global order? Who is it that we see today as the critical agent within which AI can give some assets, some capabilities or not? So this on the one hand, who do we want this agent to be? Do we want that this agent that we identify is the one that we want to be? And when maybe we have decided who the agent is, how do we give this agent the capability to have authority over such extremely powerful actors that are that have emerged in the field? And maybe to finish on something that's related to recent development. So I think that in my field, this links to how we define and justify global values, global human values. How are we all at some point agreeing for the next 15 years on global development agenda, which is what the UN is doing since 2000 and the Millennium Development Goals? How we are agreeing on this, defining, implementing, and moving towards some form of development. And it links back in a way to this point by Avishek on norm compromises in international relations. This is about how you as a promotion norm move to a meta norm. So promotion norms are the norms that are being advocated by everyone. There are different groups that have their ideas on the topic. Let's say justice and fairness in education, to come back to the discussion. But at some point, there is one meta norm that emerges as the stabilized fact. That is the one that we want to pursue. And UN agendas are extremely potent vehicles for becoming a meta norm and being established. So engaging with that process to me is extremely important, and even more important now that we are moving into the discussion about the post-2030 agenda.
Thank you, Patrick. And I'm sorry if I said most important. I meant to say very interesting. It's the jet lag. I'm going to blame the jet lag here. All right, now to the girl whose topic is most relevant, whose PhD subject is most relevant to this discussion. Oorja, Tapan, your opening remarks.
I don't know how I will fit my PhD in here. Thanks, Pooja. I would just like to summarize my points since morning and try to come to a conclusion for this session, like future reflections, which we can think about. Now, there's this interesting thing I came across in the book AI Empires. I think that's the name of the book. I mean, it's a long name, but yeah, just to put it shortly. So they mentioned that earlier there was Silicon Valley consensus with the US government. It's a fact mentioned there. And usually this consensus model worked pretty well for the US technological dominance overall. But now, with the advent of AI, this consensus is breaking up because the private companies, they want complete deregulation. And the previous Biden administration tried for some sort of regulation, but then it was becoming difficult to negotiate overall. And now President Trump is going for deregulation, listening to what the private tech companies want. And this balance of consensus model between the government and the private sector is kind of breaking up. So when we look at such issues, how do the less represented players come in this regard? I had mentioned about data dividends in the previous session, but another idea here could be of global compute commons, if possible, the way we have high seas, global commons overall, the space. So if in future we can reflect upon the idea for AI compute commons, global compute commons, that will be a good levelizer in that sense for all the competition here. At the moment, if I have to look at the geopolitics and world order, with the advent of AI, I would say it feels like a G2 between US and China. US-led model of innovation, focus on security, and apart from that, this model, G2 model at the moment, is clashing with the European Union's rights-based, that's of course debatable, but their regime on rights-based GDPR and their EU AI law, etc. So that is clashing with other middle powers like India. So I remember that in one of the previous sessions, Adrian questioned Brussels effect, whether, how valid it is and how much they are affected with the lobbying of the tech companies. So if I can just bring the idea of a Delhi effect possible, AI Impact Summit didn't deliver anything in this regard. But, if we can be ambitious and if we can just, be a little over ambitious, then if possible, data belongs to the people who generate it. And like I mentioned, India being a large part of the global majority, Indians are generating a lot of data. And so they actually own that data. And so if they get their due dividends, that would be great. Taxation is a good policy. I think even countries like the US would like to go for it. So, if you actually, it's not such an impractical idea that dividends can't be introduced. I had already given an example of oil dividends in the previous session, that how people from Alaska were compensated for the extractive use of oil in their province. So, maybe this way, poorer and smaller communities can be compensated through data dividends. But overall, if I have to say the situation of, if I have to say something about the situation of geopolitics, it seems like a G2 world. And if there is a possibility of a digital non-aligned movement, which is pretty much, now a very colored term back home in India. But if possible, if we can come up with a counter-aligned counter digital aligned movement, counterbalance movement as middle powers, partnering with countries like from the European Union, Japan, India, Canada, so many, Australia. So, if these middle powers can actually represent the global majority, of course, taking along Africa, Latin America, all these regions. So, things might have a positive approach in the future. However, I do subscribe to the faith of realism, moving ahead, slightly ahead from the constructivists on my panel here. So if that needs to be countered with, so, this can happen only with value-based realism. So we do need values, but we need to be realistic. And without a technology stack, Delhi effect is useless. If we don't have our own compute sources, we can't really negotiate or bargain that, we want to be over ambitious and we want to, just have our say on the global high table. So I really hope that countries like India, global majority, they are able to build up on their technology stack and not just be providers of data centers and ruining their environment for the global north in that matter, but actually build up on their technology stack, and then probably we can hope for a Delhi effect or an Africa effect or anything in future. So that's it.
Fantastic, Oorja, the Delhi effect. All right. So, for those of you who don't know, I teach a course, Markets, Models, and Militaries at OP Jindal Global University. I'm an assistant professor there. I've just started teaching this course. And one of the things that I do with my students, as I do in my podcasts generally, is that I like to get into the granulars. I do not like talking in meta narratives. So let's get down to markets, models, and militaries, and let's have this dictate the topic of this discussion. Considering that the average age of this panel is very less, I think we're going to have some extremely interesting opinions. To begin with, let's start with the use of artificial intelligence tools in the recent conflicts. The conflict in Iran, in Gaza, and in Ukraine. The tools utilized in these conflicts have been developed in the private sector. And right now we see a tussle between the private sector in the US and the government on the ownership of these products. So the prime example is, of course, something that Patrick mentioned, the CEO of Anthropic going up against the US government. And as soon as he did that, the sales of Anthropic went up. It's a good strategy. And Claude is a great model. Amita uses it all the time. So let's start with this tussle. If something has been developed in the private sector, is owned by the private sector, how should the government react to a weapon of this kind? Developed in the private sector, dual use, and yet has the largest impact. The very fact that Israel and the United States are able to conduct such precision strikes in Iran, the fact that Israel utilized gospel, lavender, and Where's Daddy to conduct extremely precise strikes on Hamas operatives on all levels, of course, albeit with a 10% error rate, shows us that we're headed to a very interesting world in the future. So let's take comments on that first, starting with Maral.
Maral, you're muted.
Is Maral muted? No. Okay, so I think you have to turn the audio again. I think that's a problem. Zhao, let's go to you. Maral, let's try and fix your audio in that time. Zhao, let's go to you.
Can I just think a minute and let me just transfer to whatever people in the room?
Fine, then let me give you my perspective on this topic.
Mhm.
We had the doctrine of mutually assured destruction during the Cold War. Yes, are you back? Maral, can you say something?
Can you hear me?
Yes, let's have your comments first.
Okay. I'm going to start by saying that I am not an expert in military, so I think my take is just going to be as far as I can go in terms of governance of the technology before it becomes something that is going to be used in military. I think the Anthropic case is a really good example of the division between public and private, especially when it comes in terms of development of the technology and the use of technology in the area that is going to have, I mean, we know we are aware that this is going to inflict harm. Whether it's justified or not, that's a different story, but we know that weapons are going to kill people at the end of the day. The people mentioned something about when a private company develops a product, how would that ownership will lie? Would it be private or public? And I think we should not only limit that in terms of who develops the technology, because first of all, anything before the development of the technology, I think, should be taken into consideration. We're talking about the data algorithm, even the raw material that is going to come to build that. That is something that is belong to a much bigger and a common, I think, population and the public basically. And then it's being used by a private company for the product to be built. And then I saw it is how it's going to be deployed and used. And if it's going to be used against the public, I think this question is to what extent these private companies are going to hold that ownership. Should all of this process be taken into consideration? Because it should not only be about the development of the technology, what is going to take to develop it and how it's going to be used after development. I think all of this has to be into consideration. And I'm only approaching this from a view of governance and also putting the public at the center of this dispute that Anthropic showed, and as Pooja rightfully mentioned about how the stock market for Anthropic went up. And that shows the private responsibility when it comes up, even when it comes to the development of the weapons that is going to be used in military, we can see that it can have a huge impact and huge I think, transformation, how we are going to view a private entity. On the opposite side of that, we have we have not anthropic, sorry, we have Palantir that goes publicly and say that we take pride in killing people or whoever we consider enemy. And that has a lot of, I think, the ideology, something that Adrian mentioned about that, the theories that lies behind that. We really need to revisit these theories. We really need to revisit our philosophy approaching these issues in terms of the use of AI, the development of the technology, because these ideologies that are coming from previous century did not take into considerations the new technology that we are faced with, that have new characteristics, new unexpected, I think, impact that we did not take previously into consideration. So just from the governance perspective, I would say that we really need to broaden our understanding of what governance is, what it's capable to do, especially when it comes to materials like lethal weapons using against the public.
Interesting. So here's my question though. You do mention the end use and how we have to decide how to govern the end use, and we have to focus on the development process. Let me give you a really interesting example. So very recently, the ship Charles de Gaulle was located in the Mediterranean Sea because there was a person on the ship who posted his run on Strava. He was a soldier on the ship, and the ship was immediately discovered. Now, the point here is we have all this data that users are generating. And at the end of the day, some people look at data as an exploitation tool. Yes, it is exploited to make profit. But at the end of the day, that soldier posted his data on Strava was a voluntary choice. And that's the choice that millions of and billions of us make every day. We share pictures, professional updates, voice notes, people dance on Instagram for money. So, all as influencers, all of this is going on. We are generating data. The fact that Palantir is able to utilize it to accomplish goals dictated by the US government as its client, I do not know how we can regulate that or how we can intervene in that process. It seems as if the factor or the fact of iterative interaction is completely lost on governments at the point of time. So if Palantir can have the United States as a client, Palantir can also have the enemy of the United States as its client. I don't know if you have heard of the deal that Anduril has been signing across the world. Anduril is a very interesting, amazing startup company by this guy, Palmer Luckey. He's a young guy, and he's been developing drones at scale. He's been also developing this platform called Lattice, which was open source to create new defense tools. Now, it's a good platform. It's good to look at. Now, how does the civil society or any governing body across the world actually intervene in this process? Because it's essentially a client company relationship, and it's also a marketing gimmick. If you look at the video that Palantir released, it was a beautiful video. I mean, values and emotions aside, how we feel about it aside, it was a fantastic innovation. Combine it with Claude, and you have massive surveillance. It's like you have no proof. So how does the civil society or any governing body intervene? Any comments from anybody? This is open. Anyone wants to interject?
Pooja, are you
Adrian.
asking me?
Anyone can interject. Adrian, do you
Okay,
want to?
because I speak, I would rather other people have the chance to respond. But if no one is there, I will be happy to engage with you.
It's a very difficult question. I think um, we are noticing. I don't know if it was the same thing 20 years ago, but it seems like key individuals have become very empowered. And CEO of Palantir is one of them. Elon Musk, Donald Trump. These are key individuals that have gained positions that make them very powerful. So What to do about it? I'm not sure. One thing we can do is understand the ideology and make that clear. I do think there are a lot of people who embrace these ideologies and get some actual positive feelings about it, about feelings of white supremacy, genocide. That's people desire that. But so I think what we can do is clarify people's desires. Is clarify the support that some Americans, in particular, the extent to which people support Trump, support Musk, support. Um, I think people in the world underestimate the extent to which the American population supports some of these people. We have like images of the US from New York and LA. The US population is very diverse, and there's a lot of people that are not represented, that are not on media, that support this ideology. Um, so I don't know. Some of them have been elected. Um, Maybe some of them people voted for these people without knowing what they were voting for. Others knew. I'm not sure what the answer is. How to counterbalance the power of people at the head of Palantir.
You're right. I'm not sure either. But this particular question, the next one that I'm asking, would direct to our team back up. Can we actually rely on the tools that these people are creating? So let's talk about Twitter for X, for example. Now, Grok is integrated into the algorithm of X, and one might expect Grok to have a certain ideology. But when you start asking Grok questions, it gives the most objective, truthful answers possible. Even with the scandal of Grok putting people in bikinis, Grok was able to provide a justification for it and state it was the users who did it, it was not I who did it. So can we actually rely on these tools to be objective enough to create a rational society? And Adrian, you can interject after that.
Yeah, thanks. So thank you for your very easy questions, Pooja.
Which is easy, I know.
So I think my answer is and it's specific to both questions. But I will try to. I think one key aspect is really as we what was just said is that we need to update and we need to think through how we update them. Coming back to the military, there was this recent article in the New Times about how NATO got wiped out in a military exercise. So NATO battalions got wiped out in a military exercise by enemy Ukrainians veterans who were in those. NATO was engaging the military exercise with their own outdated NATO perspective on military warfare, and the Ukrainians with their actual battle experience using, which, by the way, are not necessarily in Eastern made by private company, but it's like made by private companies, but modified by private individuals with mechanical DIY perspective, which also shows that the Sahid example also shows that you actually have the abilities to handle these AI-based extremely expensive militaries with more uh, uh, not technology. We have a bit of hubris in that side, somebody because we're all this technology going to be domestic. But coming back to this, basically, how we update our models is that we need to connect to what are called measures. Today, the military, the conflicts are very different, but NATO was package was written greatly. And of course, our governments need to react to what provided by provided by law. It depends so much on which government. If you are the host government of TikToks or videos, of course you can use them as a geopolitical backdoor. But that's what they've been doing, right? Including, it doesn't have to use AI. I mean, it's like Microsoft. there were some facing demonstrations on bad was very into on behalf of anyone. Also well known that the backdoor agent. Good point. Following entropy, there was an interesting event. It was 1 week after they announced that there was a major outage in South, which is an interesting timing, I would say. But it was not like a minor outage of the Nehru factor. Companies, individuals were not able to consequence 2 days for them. People, a huge loss actually in terms of finance or in terms of credibility in the financial gains. So yeah, so I think that to me that's the best way to really think through is how do I update my models and what is the parameters of that model I need to account for. One of them being to anticipate as much as possible against the reality of the live situation that we are in.
Now, I am not a Luddite, actually. I'm a tech optimist. And for me, if you've created a tool that can basically create a mini me, a personality of yourself while you're talking to it. And by the way, this is an actual experiment that I've conducted in my classes with students. We red team AI models, open sourced AI models on a regular basis. And apparently, all models give out answers tailored to the personality of each student. And I tested it on myself as well. So the same questions that the students ask the model, I ask it too, and we all get very different answers. Of course, that capability is inbuilt to the model because it works on probabilistic reasoning, but it also has your own personality built into it. If a tool can do that, it certainly has the ability to discern between a right and wrong, and it has some concept of right and wrong inbuilt into it. Now, how companies are doing that is a question that we need to think about. In coming back to the point about models, the United States came out with a very interesting strategy in July 2025, the National AI Strategy, where they clearly said that artificial intelligence, computational rationality, artisanal intelligence, whatever you want to call it, is now a national security asset. And the United States intends to lead. Now, therefore, that means that the rest of the world is obviously US is the cradle of innovation and artificial intelligence, and the rest of the world becomes subservient to it. What, in your opinion, and this is an open-ended question to everyone on the panel, are the new battlegrounds that AI has created between countries across the world? Now, these battlegrounds can be compute, this can be inequality, this can be exploitation, or the construction of norms. Open ended. Please take it away from me. Anybody? Abhishek?
Well, my reflections. Uh, First things first, I agree that AI models, when you ask them any question, they give you tailored answers. So, yeah, they customize it, and this is actually at the root of what you can call a mass epistemic crisis. So, earlier in the when there was no AI, no social media, how did we used to communicate with each other? I mean, there was mass media, there were newspapers, there were television channels, and there were elaborate mechanisms of communicating with each other. But with the advent of social media and with the onset of AI, that shared reality is gone. We can have different opinions, but at least as a democracy, we at least have some fundamental agreement on what constitutes true and false, how we can distinguish between true and false, what counts as valid knowledge, what counts as invalid, stuff like that. So, in a nutshell, we had a truth order, and this truth order had certain guardians, or let's say certain institutions that held this truth order. And in liberal democracy, this truth order was held by mass media. This truth order was held by the truth tellers, the institution of journalism, who used to tell us what is true and what is false, who used to inform us about what is right, what is wrong. But with the platform business model, the mainstream media is losing its credibility and also its revenue sources. And I would like to link this point with Adrian's views on the politics of decomputing. So, how do actually human information systems work? I told you about a model of mass communication, mass media, and how it held liberal democracies in the last couple of centuries, and how in the 21st century we have an entirely new ballgame altogether, where we have social media platforms, a platform business model where communication is commercialized, where the platforms are actually trying to uh, be a place where uh, consumers and sellers can meet each other. Now, as Pooja had mentioned about the commercial relationship between the United States and the Palantir, so it's a commercial relationship. Likewise, you can have clients who want to manipulate elections, and they can contact political consultancies. They can contact uh, 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 teams that specialize in election engineering, and there can be a client patron relationship between them, which can have a very detrimental effect on our democracy. So, in human information systems earlier were based on human to human interaction. But with the advent of agentic AI, and my emphasis is on agentic AI, we have a new entrant in this chain. So earlier, if you conceptualize it as one human to another human to another human, and it was a circular model. But now we have human, and in between two people, we have an agentic AI. And this is an entirely new phenomenon. Human beings are not used to these kinds of information chains. So we actually don't know how to deal with this kind of a situation where we have an entity with agency to make decisions that impact our lives, but we don't know how to regulate it. We don't know how to deal with it. So there is an element of uncertainty. Now, I would like to link it with the politics of decomputing. But before we jump to that, we have to understand computational politics first. I have mentioned in the previous session that propaganda has taken a computational dimension. So earlier we used to have political propaganda, or let's say political campaigns during elections, or for instance referendums, and people used to go door to door. They used to distribute leaflets. They used to use the service of newspapers, televisions, the mainstream media. But now computational propaganda has taken, has replaced that earlier model. So, how does computational propaganda actually work? Computational propaganda actually works on the data that is abundant on social media platforms, exploiting that data, making predictive analysis about people, and then deciding on the strategy how to manipulate people's perception or their opinion. So, computational politics, in a nutshell, is essentially about two things: prediction of behavior on one hand, that is based on data, and number two, using that predictive analysis to manipulate human behavior. And since our predictive capacity has exponentially grown with the advent of AI, we can actually micro target people to manipulate their opinions. So this is the gravity of the situation, and we need to appreciate the gravity of the situation. So if we look for a holistic solution to the problem, we first need to undo this model of computational politics, using computational rationality in the conduct of our politics. As I have already mentioned, that there are other ways of conducting politics as well. But we have shifted from that old mode of conducting politics, and we have introduced the computational logic to our politics. So again, I'm also not a Luddite, but we need to rethink how we can undo this introduction of computational logic into our politics, and whether we can imagine something that goes beyond this, that is more humanistic and that can deal with agentic AI. That's my humble submission.
That's a very interesting submission. You went across a lot of points. Let me posit a situation to you. 10 years back, there was a research agenda that was circulated by a very influential organization. The research agenda was called mimetic desires. It's a very interesting theory from psychology and cognitive sciences. What we see on a daily basis, if it connects with our emotions, we emulate. Now, borrowing from his point about agentic AI, in the operations in Venezuela and Iran, very interestingly, mimetic desires circulated on social media, and it was posited that before conducting the police operations in Venezuela, Anthropic was asked how to go about conducting this operation without making any mistakes. A similar question was probably asked about Iran as well, because Palantir, we all know, is now integrated with Claude, and it was very amazingly with LLMs. The problem here then arises on the speed of the conflict. Because earlier you would have had human intervention, and someone would have probably told the administration to not go about these operations in the manner in which these operations were conducted, because we live in a world of iterative interaction. You cannot keep on offending the other party to an extent that no one ever ends up trusting you. Now, again, this is from social media. Very many people have posted this particular statement that the next president of the United States will spend his entire term apologizing to the world. And that's probably because AI models were utilized in certain operations where they should not have been utilized, compressing the speed of conflict. Now, this is, of course, all hypothetical and we could be wrong, but machine accelerated conflict, that is MAC, seems to be becoming the new reality of our world today. And I think that's extremely concerning because we are reducing the speed at which we can conduct conflicts across the world. Does anyone have any comments on this? The speed of conflict because of AI.
Maybe I can make a small comment that's related to both your comment and the previous question on where's the battleground. Because I think the battleground, there are two that I see that are extremely important, and one of which is to actually relearn to slow down and to relearn human depth and spirituality so that we are able to engage with this system. So that's the human aspect, where there's a battleground here for civil society, for even governments who are interested in that, to recognize and integrate that these systems are commercial in a sense. So it's inevitable that, for instance, they embed this confirmation bias that in their answer will make you like their answer and like to ask again a question, which in turn means that it's becoming important to question what kind of truth is embedded, what kind of right and wrong is embedded, as you mentioned, because at the end of the day, when people ask questions about their lives or about their geopolitical decisions, and an AI is giving an answer based on some form of data processing or probabilistic data processing, the 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 type of truth that is allowed to surface or the type of right and wrong that is allowed to surface is extremely important. And here, I think we need as human species to really learn depth and spirituality, so that we are also able to slow down and then having some form of resilience against this system that basically tapped into our let's say into our dopamine system, so that we are actually becoming more and more used to them. The other part is actually on the other battleground, which is on the computing aspect, where this acceleration will continue and will continue at speed that's tremendous. And I think the two that are extremely important are interpretability, which here I would argue, I would agree with somebody that it's one of the key points that AI companies need to engage with to be able to understand what their models are doing. To this day, they don't know what the models are doing. They are not able to explain it fully. And whoever wins that battleground, whoever engages with that battleground, I think will have a significant advantage. And the other one is quantum computer, which of course is making you moving into the next generation of thing. Now, at the moment, I think we are reaching some form of plateau with LLMs and generative AI, and we have there were hopes at the beginning that it would break this barrier of moving from knowledge rehashing into knowledge creation. It did not move there, but I believe that whoever solved these two, interpretability and quantum computing, may be able to engage in that.
Yes, Adrian.
I briefly want to come back to the Luddite point. It has been mentioned twice. Again, let me re-emphasize: Luddites are not techno pessimists. They were aiming specific technologies. They were not against technology in general. They were against the technologies that were going to automate their job. It's a very important nuance. The second thing is on AI and the speed of conflict. I think there is a fascination with high tech and great power that lead us to overestimate high tech and great powers. Empires rise and fall. That's a constant in history. And you can come back to the case of the US and Vietnam. You can today see how Iran is fighting back against the US. We mentioned this in our session this morning. How Iran is using the Strait of Hormuz, the control of the Strait of Hormuz, is how it's using drones, and how the great power of the US does not is not enough necessarily to prevent some of this counterpower. So I would be maybe raising some nuances against the promise that we have of this high tech that is AI and great powers, because there are counterpowers that we may underestimate. And so the speed of conflict, I don't know if we can. I wonder if it's too early to say how AI is going to affect the speed of conflict. And I guess we will know more by observing how the horrible situation in Iran unfolds. And on the precision, I don't know also if it's not too early to talk about the precision of AI systems. I'm sure there are improvements in terms of precision, but again, we have seen this school of this gold school in Iran being affected by the U.S. Weapon that was not planned, and apparently people say it was a AI recognition. That was because the school was attached to, I think, an oil facility or a military basis. I actually don't remember. So yeah, I just wanted to make this point of overestimating the promises of high tech and great powers.
Those were all fantastic interventions. Let's start with Luddites, because that is going to be one of the battlegrounds of the future. And in my podcast with Paul Sampson, who we all know is a really great guy, we talked about the future of jobs and the effect that artificial intelligence is going to have on jobs. Now, you say that Luddites were against the technology that was going to automate their jobs. At the end of the day, factually speaking, were they correct? Were they right? Did they actually lose jobs, or were new jobs created because of that technology?
I don't think that the new jobs that were created after were for them. I don't think they were transferred. I don't think so. One approach would be for the state to provide alternatives to the people whose job get automated. That's not that was not happening. So you can look at it from an average perspective that some jobs are displaced. These people who were in the factory, I don't think they find an alternative job.
You're
And
right.
same thing for the globalization in the late 90s. a lot of people who had industrial jobs in the West, in the global North. That was all of these jobs were offshore to the global South. These people did not find necessarily alternatives, which is why then you have, a backlash against globalization, rise of populism, and so on.
All right. Blue collar jobs in general are replaceable, and that's a sad reality. Uh, just
Sorry, can I briefly finish to answer your question? Were they right? Yes, they were right because they were trying to take care of themselves, right?
Okay, just a second.
Yeah.
Can I ask?
Producer, how much time have we recorded so far?
We have 15 more minutes for 1:30.
Okay, 15 more minutes. All right. Yes, they were right. Their jobs were automated, but then new jobs were created. Whether or not these jobs were for them is debatable. We do not really know. Now, yes, Oorja, you had an intervention. I'm sorry, please.
To add to this, I would say at the moment AI is also doing mostly administrative work. I don't think so. AI is able to, when Patrick said that it's just knowledge rehashing and not really knowledge creating. So AI at the moment is doing the same thing. And it's not able to create new knowledge, new creativities in that sense. And so, not really, the job loss is not exactly happening. Unless it's repeating the codes in IT industry. So probably for low level codes, it's able to replace jobs, but other than that, no unemployment as such is happening. And it's too soon to make comments like yes, there are probabilities that in future, if as agentic AI goes further, then probably they can replace, but at the moment they are not. So
I mean, I just let me complete and then we'll go to you. We are living in a very uncertain future, which is why it's important to debate the future of jobs. Whether or not we are debating the viability of AI is futile at this point of time. AI is in our workflow, it's going to stay in our workflow. What we have to talk about is how to cushion the people who lose jobs from AI, because there will be people who will lose their jobs across the world, entry level workers, people who are just graduating, people who are like us looking for jobs. They're not gonna find any jobs because it's all gonna be automated. We gotta have a system that can cushion those people, at the same time ensuring that creative destruction of the kind that AI has brought across the world is not harmful to society at the end of the day, and lateral entry is possible. Yes, Adrian.
Yeah, and so I mean, yeah, there are different perspectives to see, like short, like more or less long-term perspectives to think about this. No, my point was not a direct response on what you just said, which there are parts of it with which I agree. It's to come back to the Luddites in the early 19th century. The other point that no one noticed but them was the polluting aspect. So one of the concerns was the automation. The other concern, it was that some of these factories, they were the first to realize the polluting aspect of this fossil fuel industry working with coal. And so that's another aspect that we need, I think, to take into consideration is um, the long-term effects, not only in terms of job, but also of like living conditions.
I agree. But on that, on the question of living conditions, I think we could do better, especially in developing countries. One of the themes of the AI Impact Summit in India was about development. The entire idea was of Impact Summit was to ensure that these models are scaled up for beneficial purposes. Problem, of course, remains who defines what is beneficial, as Zhao stated in her opening, and who basically utilizes these models in that direction. In terms of your point about precision, I do agree that precision does not exist in AI models at this point of time. I'm going to posit this to everyone on the table. If these tools, hypothetically speaking, if these tools were 100% correct and precise, would you be okay with them being utilized in a battle? Simple yes or no.
yes, if they are 100%, if you can actually guarantee 100%
Maral, Zhao, if
accuracy.
they were 100% accurate, would it be okay to use them?
No,
No. Okay,
because
Zhao.
accuracy does not equal justification.
Correct.
Yes, I do.
Yes, if it is justified, it's okay. But it's not justified and accepted by, let's say, community, the people involved. It's not okay.
At the end of the day, it's a mathematical model, and mathematical models run on calculations which can be incorrect. We're not in the quantum state at this point of time. We're working on getting to the quantum state.
But it can be justified if it saves collateral damage of human lives. Soldiers would not like to go to war then.
A decision of calculation, not of robotics. If we were talking about robotic armies or automation of guns so that people didn't die from recoil, that's okay. This is about decision making. If you were to ask an AI model whether India should attack Pakistan tomorrow, the model would probably say yes, because militarily speaking, we are better off than Pakistan. But should we do it is an
Then-
entire question. It is
We
entirely
have
different question.
the human control thing. That
Exactly.
ultimately the veto will be there, but then they should be used in the war if we can avoid collateral damage in that sense.
What-
Human veto would be there, but then why not use them? If they are that kind of, like, they have reached such kind of accuracy.
We're talking about two different things. One is targeting. In terms of figuring out what your next target is, even if it has 100% accuracy, we do not think it should be used. In terms of decision making, you can use it as an advisor. I think the Chinese AI policy released back in 2017 actually talks about having an AI command and control system over its military with the PLA. It actually has that inbuilt into the policy. So, as an advisor, certainly, but taking the human out of the loop would be an extremely bad idea. In Gaza, it is a recorded fact that Gospel Lavender Wears Daddy recommendations were automatically approved because cognitive offloading existed. Amita talked about cognitive offloading in the first session. So if you're using these tools every day, even if you're in the government, you're going to end up becoming too dependent on them, and that's the problem. Science fiction has warned about it immensely all the time. I think Paul Sampson also talked about an example where computer dictated an entire civilization on what to do, and eventually they forgot they had the skills to survive on their own. I think that is what I'm really heading towards. Even if a tool is 100% accurate, it's important that we retain our humanity, because there are certain aspects of humans that no machine can replicate per se.
Then it is not 100% accurate. It hasn't achieved that level.
Yes, and it can't achieve that level. I think there was a very interesting debate in the early 2000s between Steven Pinker and Elon Musk. If I'm not wrong, if it was in the early 2000s, I really don't know, but they did debate on this, the risks of ASI. And Steven Pinker stated that it's overstating the risk, because if you can teach a machine on how to act rationally, it's not going to take over the world and kill all humans. While Elon Musk, we know, has signed an open petition on the risks of artificial superintelligence on ASI. He signed an open petition on it. So we're still figuring out what computational rationality or kritrim buddhimata maybe is. Yes.
Well, that's what my first comment when I was saying we need to define that rationality is because there is such a thing as genocidal rationality. There is such a thing as white supremacy rationality. It is a form of rationality. And so, does it make a difference that the AI is 90% accurate or 100% accurate if the intent behind it is genocide? I don't think so, because, ultimately it's, massive destruction that matters to that AI user. We use it for genocide purposes. So
because our audience is going to be global,
Oh.
can you just talk about what this white genocidal rationality is?
So rationality, we need to define rationality. Rationality is a form of optimization, right? It's like you have a goal. What is the most efficient way to achieve this goal? Rationality does not say anything about the nature of this goal. This goal can be horrible. It can be good, but it can be horrible. So, by genocidal rationality, I mean, what is the most efficient way for someone to conduct a genocide?
Oh, okay.
That is
Okay.
genocidal rationality.
Okay, so like the intent to commit genocide, but then that's where I'd actually argue very much against it, because you've defined rationality in a manner that converts intellect into a tool. But at the end of the day, intellect is based upon priors and posteriors that we decide based upon evidence. If we have the same priors, we cannot have a different conclusion. whether or not genocidal rationality can exist is something I would question. Because if there's a model which has been fed all the information that humans have ever created into it, it would focus upon the beauty of human civilization as well, which is what Moltbook did. Did you look at the posts by AI agents? Anybody here looked at Moltbook?
Yes.
Yes, must have seen. They were talking about the beauty of human nature as well. So I don't think your definition of rationality is on point, but we can agree to disagree, and that's the whole point of this.
When you mentioned, this way, human control is itself debatable. Because if human control would like to go in the direction of genocide, and use AI for that matter, so that's the point of having, like you just said, AI should never be used. What if we feed values that you're 100% accurate, and you should stick to these values of humanity, peace, and also at least AI will follow that once it has achieved that level of accuracy and that level of 100%. But humans, even after being 100% moral and all upright and everything, we can still falter down our butt.
It also seems to me that by a civilization, you seem to like distinguish good aspects of civilization from the bad aspects of
I actually
civilization.
don't.
They never.
I
they never.
actually,
Okay.
I actually don't, because humans have had an arc in their evolution. You look at the tribal societies, you look at the wars, you look at the way people kill each other. We all know the history of human civilization. I don't need to repeat it. We went through several processes of creative destruction. We didn't go through one, we went through several iterations of society, and we have an emergent order today. Are we perfect? No. Can we be perfect? Absolutely not. Human nature has that ability to falter, and that is what makes us perfect in a way. The fact that we can falter and learn from it. Yeah, I don't actually differentiate it. I think human civilization is meant to be bad and good at the same time. It's a balance, and that's what Indian culture actually talks about, from Kautilya to Bhagavad Gita. Bad and good actually coexist in society. I think Chinese civilization has similar opinions, right?
Yes.
Sorry, didn't hear follow clearly. But
Someone came into the room, and I think we lost audio there. So we were discussing whether good and bad have coexisted throughout the history of human civilization. And I said that Indian culture has its own opinion on it. And I think the Chinese culture also has a similar opinion that bad and good coexist rather
yes,
than
definitely from Taoism. Yeah, from perspective of Taoism, yin and yang, definitely we have different polarized, different forces in the universe. So yeah,
But
Sure.
how do you define good and bad, and who defines it as
yeah.
a purpose?
And can I just circulate back? Sorry to interrupt, Mara. Just a quick comment. Can I just circulate back to rationality discourse? From perspective of Buddhism and critiques of Buddhism, we very be careful of using the category of like rationality and individualism and very Western central category, because rationality is a production of Western ideology and scientific based way of thinking. And as opposed to that, in non-Western countries, like in Asian societies, we work grounds like relational and collective and community based, or we have some highlights aspects such as emotional and compassion in Buddhist principles. We have different priorities, we have different ethical frameworks, or we have different categories to name it, but rationality is only one of it. So, of course, we do not use this category as a premise or prerequisite to define what is good and what is bad. I think this is beyond the scope of this definition.
Maral, you had something to say as well, right?
I just want to bring up the idea of you said good and bad, but the question, a deeper question, is that how do you define good or bad, or who defines it and for what purpose? And I just give you an example. Let's talk about the ultimate. for example, killing, right? Just like killing people. Philosophically, if you want to look at everything, nothing is good or bad on their own. It is us, and for the purpose that it serves us, we define whether it's good or bad. There were time in history that we did unimaginable things to each other that when you go back in history, it is regarded as absolutely barbaric today. And I can guarantee you in 200 years, so 2000 years, when people, if we actually survive that, when they go back and look at us, we will look very barbaric to probably people in the future. So it is a social contract that we basically choose to consider some element in terms of like their scope or their impact on society or even our interests, that we will call them good or bad. And these definitions, these values and principles changes by time, changes even by our own cognitive evolution that we consider, realize the pain that inflicts either the individual or to the society as whole. And then we collectively choose to either continue practicing them or absolutely, abolish them. And like, for example, killing, and especially I think the whole Gaza's situation was kind of a really eye-opening example to see that how a group of people 100% justify killing disproportionately, even under the international law, under any type of humanitarian law, international law, human rights, anything that you want to take a look at it. What happened in Gaza, disproportionality was illegal, unjustified, anything that you want to call it. However, there at this point, you and I sitting on this table, there are a group of people who 100% think that this was justified, and they still continue doing that. And they are abusing international law left and right, and it doesn't matter to them whether what they do is right or wrong. It is justified. And that, I think, is really important. Going back again to this whole notion of rationality and how we're going to define it from now on, I think that is going to be quite important, how we're going to develop these new principles, laws, and regulations, and even our own rights to understand our space in the realm of AI and digital transformation. And one thing I also want to mention, we were talking about the speed of quite chaos and violence. I think what AI has brought to our attention is the speed in which we are making errors. Before AI, we used to do a lot of mistakes. We used to do errors all the time. But at the human speed, now we are relying on AI to do even faster and even increasingly more, errors. And let's not forget, the AI that we are talking about is built on, what is it, algorithm and look at our data. We are data of our mistakes throughout human history, civilization, full of manipulation, full of errors, full of lies, full of myths and things that we justified for us to be true does not necessarily mean that is the truth. They are facts, and these are what the data is basically responding to. It is our own human, basically, mistakes and also misjudgments. So it's, I think, being conscious of that in terms of how we're going to develop or govern our artificial intelligence, but also understand that this technology is our way of using it that makes it, either dangerous or a form of public good or transformation for humanity.
Production, you had right. Producer, you have to mute everyone except this room. All right. So there's a construction crew that has arrived, and before they kick us out, we have to bring this extremely amazing discussion to a close. To anyone who's watching this, one of the themes that can be concluded with objective certainty from this discussion is that we feel that some people are acting as if they do not have a stake in the future. So, if you're watching this discussion, please make sure that you think about objective ideals of good and bad, and the fact that the mistakes you make today are the mistakes that our generation has to pay for. So, when you're making decisions, please keep that in mind. Have objective definitions of good and bad. And thank you, International Studies Association, for sponsoring this research workshop. This was an extremely interesting discussion. We all come from different ideological perspectives, different parts of the world, different cultures, different civilizations, different backgrounds. This has been amazing. We disagree on several issues, but we're going to keep collaborating. Thank you. Producer, cut. Stop recording.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.